I'm Robin Miller Brecker.
And I'm Karen Lenzer. Welcome to Seeking Center, the podcast.
Join us each week as we have the conversations and weed through the spiritual and holistic clutter for you. We'll boil it down to what you need to know now.
We're all about total wellness, which to us means building a healthy life on a physical, mental, and spiritual level. We'll talk to the trailblazers who will introduce you to the practices, products, and experiences that may be just what you need to hear about to transform your life.
If you're listening to this, it's no accident. Think of this as your seeking center and your place to seek your center. And for even more mega inspo, sign up for Seeking Center, the newsletter at seekingcenter.app. It'll come as no surprise to our fellow seekers listening that meeting Kendall Carrier came as what can only be described as the universe saying, you must meet. In a stream of synchronicities in a short amount of time, we ended up on a Zoom and a soul connection was unlocked. Kendall is a cancer survivor, anxiety and cancer coach, and the founder of the Deep Center, which is an online wellness studio for busy and multi-passionate women who struggle with anxiety. Does this sound like you? Kendall created the Deep Center to help you reclaim your power through meditation and aligned connection. We'll be digging into the how, what, and why on what that means. Whether or not you've been on the cancer journey, if you've ever identified yourself as an overachiever, perfectionist, or you deal with feelings of anxiety or of not being good enough, Kendall has tools for you. Her infectious energy and highly thought out protocols are a gift to us all. Let's get deep. Hi, Kendall.
Hi. What you're doing is so unique. And so we're really excited to hear more and about your journey. And maybe we should start there.
Yes, we want to hear how this all came to be. Your journey is inspiring.
Thank you. Gosh, I had a mentor say, I'm sure we've all heard this quote, like scratching your own itch. And that's really where the Deep Center came from. I've been in wellness to some capacity between being a nutrition coach and fitness instructor and kind of instructor of everything, yoga, Pilates, all the things. I found myself at the beginning of the pandemic with a breast cancer diagnosis, and then 10 days later having to close my fitness studios down. And so we're all locked at home. We all had our own personal crisis during the lockdown, but I had this, am I going to die and be bankrupt at the same time? How did this happen in a matter of what felt like 10 days? Like just 10 days earlier, the skies were blue and this pandemic was just a mutter in the distance. So here I was locked down with really crippling anxiety. And I'd always said that I had what I called resting anxiety. The perfectionist part of it, the overachiever, the not feeling good enough, the being high strung was always looping in the background. But then when I had this personal life crisis on top of it, it became absolutely unmanageable. And so I started to look for resources to really guide me to the other side of breast cancer. I thought surely there's some sort of like online studio. It's 1 in 8 women get breast cancer. It is of both genders. It's the most diagnosed cancer. And surely I'm not the first person who's ever had it. I just thought, oh, these resources must be really dialed. There's someone who's, I know how you're feeling, do this. And I know how your body feels after surgery, do this. And I really couldn't find it. What I found was either very medical. And the truth is, there's even in the breast cancer world, there's a lot of different diagnoses. So even if you have breast cancer, it's often very different from someone you know's breast cancer. And so what I found was either very medical or not very applicable, definitely not very chic. It didn't feel cool. It wasn't something I wanted to really go back to. Just sort of sad. And I was like, where is like a young, in shape patient going through breast cancer? Where are the resources for her to wrap her mind around it and get her body right? When I couldn't find it, I just decided, or maybe it was decided for me because I got this ping in a meditation. Just, this is what you need to do. You need to help other women just like you. And so I sold my studios, and 8 months ago, I launched the Deep Center. I spent about a year conceptualizing it and getting it really tight, and then launched it 8 months ago.
Wow. I'd have to just say, just listening to your story, first of all, in the beginning of the pandemic, fear was just so rampant about COVID.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine what it must have felt like for you to be in the midst of that fear, hospitals being overloaded, you getting this diagnosis, and then you didn't really have a place to go to embrace other people in the same places you.
I couldn't leave the house.
And in your situation, I know when we've talked to you before, you couldn't even get your surgery.
Right.
And you were in this weird limbo. And the
Yeah.
fear, even with that, like you wanted to get this out of your body.
Yes,
Can you talk
that's it.
about that for a minute?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So if you go back to those times, the day before my surgery, the hospital, the major hospital in New Orleans closed. They stopped doing surgery. So unless you had some emergent issue, you had to wait, even cancer. So the day before my surgery, I got a call from my oncologist who had told me when there was some scuttle about maybe something was going to be canceled. He said, you can't afford to wait. The cancer you have, you cannot afford to wait. So you're going to have the surgery. Don't worry. We're going to make sure this happens. And then the day before he called, canceled it because the hospital's closed and said, but don't worry. The cancer you have, it can wait. I'm like, which one is it? So it was such, oh my gosh, just what do you do when you know you have cancer and you can't do anything about it? You can't get it out. You can't have the necessary surgery.
What did you start to do? Because I know you spoke about meditation. Did you have some of these tools prior to this diagnosis?
Yes. I did. I've been a long time, twice a day, 20-minute meditator. And I've been doing that for about 8 years, which has been a lifeline. But when you're stuck at home with massive anxiety, the meditations were painful. I didn't want to actually be there with the thoughts coming and going. So that's when I started to practice the emotional freedom technique. I started tapping, felt better, and then looked at the clinical data, because I was doing everything I could think of. But in 4 days of a tapping practice, you can reduce anxiety up to 40% and depression by 35%. And there's even studies on PTSD and cravings and pain relief. And what I liked about it versus meditation is that it was so active. I didn't have to just sit. I could actually move my body and tap on these points and drop the cortisol in my body while increasing the dopamine. So I started to get less stressed and happier. Now I just became a tapping fool because it's temporary and then you got to go back to it. But I was tapping, I was meditating, I was moving, I was walking, I was praying, I was really diving deep into the gratitude practice of, I don't wish cancer on anyone, but I think Karen, we even talked about this last time, the people that show up in your life. I'm happy that I went through it just for that, just to feel, I could feel people praying for me. I could feel it physically. And then they showed up in such big ways. And it was just, I don't know, I just felt so loved, even though I was so scared.
Can you talk about too, because I think for people listening, it's like you sprung into action when you got the diagnosis. But can you just talk about that moment when you did get that diagnosis? Back to what you were saying before, so healthy, so young. How do you make that leap from the paralysis of fear?
For better or worse, I outed myself unintentionally. Because I was young and healthy, they found it in a standard mammogram. I went back for another one, went back for an ultrasound, had the biopsy. They were pretty sure it was cancer. But in the waiting time between the biopsy and finding out I had cancer, I pretty much convinced myself, this is impossible. No one in my family has breast cancer. I've come from a large family, predominantly women. I am young. I am active. I'm a nutritionist. I do all of the things. This is going to come back negative. So I started documenting on Instagram. And the documentation was really like, you know what? We're all struggling with something. And we're all walking around, maybe carrying a burden, and your friends may not know, acquaintances might know. And just, I was trying to communicate that let's be easy on each other. We never know what we're walking around with. This is what's been on my heart this week. I'm sure it's going to be fine, but I'm getting my results this afternoon. And so I did a live video.
Oh my
videos.
God.
Yeah, it was nuts. In retrospect, I'm guessing it's a good idea. At the time I'm filming my husband going into the surgical center with me, I'm going to get this big negative, it was nothing diagnosis. And so they take me into the tiny room with all the Kleenex. And I remember looking at my husband, this is weird. Like, why are we in here? Heart beating? No. And the doctor walks in and just gets right to it and says, yep, you've got breast cancer. And you drop your body. I didn't even hear anything. That's why you have to have someone with you. After I got in the car, I knew I'd have to call my family. I knew that people were actually on Instagram waiting for me to pop back on.
Oh my goodness.
And so I get back on maybe an hour after finding out and I'm crying. It's still on my Instagram stories of me having to say, oh my God, I do have breast cancer. I can't believe this. So I decided I would start documenting all of it. I documented going into the MRI. I documented every little piece of it. And I lost count at some point, but there was something like 54 women attributed getting their first mammogram to that series, because the whole time I'm like, go get your mammogram. Oh my God, go get your mammogram. Only 10% of cancers are genetic, which I didn't know at the time. And I was so surprised how many people are scared to get mammogram, and they're scared that they're going to hurt, and scared obviously of what they're going to find out, but you don't want to wait. Yeah, ended up documented it all. And I was wondering if I hadn't done that first video, pretty convinced that I didn't have it. I wonder how I would have probably ultimately would have communicated it and tried to help other women. Because again, I had a lot of women come into my DMs and say, I never told anyone, but I had breast cancer. There's almost a shame around it that is still to this day surprising to me. No one does anything to get it. It happens. We're made of cells, and cells sometimes go bad. So I just wanted to be some sort of mouthpiece for people that feel some shame or don't feel comfortable sharing.
You were forced into that vulnerability.
Yeah.
Like it or not, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I really answered your question, but what I did with it is just try to help other people. I felt better about my own situation if I felt like I was doing something.
It feels like you gave yourself literally a beat. You gave yourself an hour, and then you were like, you know what? I'm just going to be honest. And then I'm going to take people through it with me. And you built a community around it. And I'm sure ended up inspiring a lot of other people. And I can see how that would keep you going.
Yes. Yeah. That's what wakes you up in the morning. I would say, unfortunately, more often than not, at least a couple times a week, someone will send me a message and say their friend just got diagnosed. What do I do? And what I usually recommend they do is actually share either their number with me or give them my number. Because what I wanted, and I think a lot of women don't have, is someone impartial to talk to. Meaning everyone will tell you, like, you got to go to this doctor. You got to get this surgery. Oh, don't get this surgery. Oh, this was a nightmare. Don't do this. And if you're doing that with a close friend or like your mom or your sister, you have to be worried also about what they're feeling. And so a lot of going through cancer is honestly trying to make the other person feel better about your diagnosis because they're scared. And so I really started coaching before I was an anxiety and cancer coach, because I'm like, when they talk to me, I'm not going to tell them what to do with their body. They're just going to get to talk to someone that they may never see again. And so they can say whatever they want. They can ask whatever they want. And so I did that for a year before I even opened the Deep Center. And I still do it. If someone's diagnosed, I'm like, let's get on the phone.
What a resource.
You do need that, don't you? Because what you find is you're just in a totally different club of people who are in different walks of life, different income levels, different education, because it's indiscriminate. Just like you said, who it targets. But the fact that I just love your message of don't let it paralyze you. Obviously, the fear and the time that it happened had to be overwhelming. But the fact that you could take action and that you were putting the camera on yourself. How do I want my story to unfold? How do I want to take control of my story? And I love to say diagnosis is not the prognosis. It's just a piece of paper that says where you are right now at this very minute. You can drive your own boat in any direction that you want, as fast or as slow as you want. But the most important thing is to move forward and not let it.
Well, and I think what you're saying, Karen, for Kendall, it's like you held yourself accountable. And for everyone, that might be slightly different. And you put that out there in the world. But it could be cool for people to just document it themselves, even if they're not going to share it.
That's right.
Publicly.
Yes.
I think that telling, as you were saying, Karen, it was a way for you. How do you want your story to unfold?
That's right.
And you also want to hear from someone who has gone through the darkness and gotten to the other side. It's so important to hear from someone who has made it through, because I think when you get that diagnosis, all you can think about is all the people that didn't make it through. That's the first thing that goes through your mind. So to see you in where you are now, to have all these resources of information because you walk the walk.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I also wanted to create something that for the people that didn't identify with, cancer's been hijacked by like hot pink and glitter. And it's so bizarre to me. So it's like, I didn't want to be pigeonholed. I wanted to really be able to appeal to the woman who feels like a little bit more elevated from the glitter and the pink and not wanting to be projected onto them, that this is part of your identity now. You're like this pink ribbon person now. And
it's something that's happened to you, but it isn't you. And there's a difference. And you can define it in your own way and make it like you did. Make it your own thing, your own journey.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Tell us about the deep center. There's so much.
There's so much. There's so much. As a matter of fact, I'm always like, maybe it's too wide. Maybe I need to narrow my scope. But I knew I wanted to create some sort of anxiety online studio, some well-being studio. Because when I was working with women going through cancer, it all came back to trying to mitigate that anxiety. So there's a studio component that has mindful and well-being resources like guided meditations, guided tapping, ways to rehab your body. There's classes so that you don't start rolling your shoulders back and that you can stand confidently your own 2 feet without discomfort. Classes for neuropathy and lymphedema, all those things that can potentially come after, and yoga nidra. So any sort of resource a woman might need if she's not doing a great job handling anxiety on her own, or she's navigating breast cancer, I have a studio for that. So people can log in just like the Peloton and stream classes on demand. So that's the studio piece. I also launched a course called the Daily Health Accelerator, because I interviewed and worked with a bunch of women, and it didn't matter where they were in their phase of the breast cancer journey. If they were just diagnosed till 20 years out, the fear of cancer coming back is very prevalent. And I have a client who calls it the pink monster. She's just, when life's going well, like that pink monster, that prevalent fear of cancer coming back, like rears its ugly head. So I created a course to help women really stop worrying about cancer coming back, meaning we can't guarantee anything, but there are things that you can do. The first part of it is really getting control of anxiety, feelings of isolation, getting those tools in your toolbox. The second part is reclaiming your physical power so that you don't have to just be a sitting duck for lymphedema, which is a lifetime risk. If you've had even one lymph node removed or radiated, you could potentially have lymphedema. And so being able to give women those protocols, because there's one thing I see missing after diagnosis or surgery. It's you ring the bell and they're like, you're great, see you in 6 months. And you're like, what the heck do I do now? What do I do with my body? No one suggested. They're like, you'll be fine. You were active before. And the truth was, I started like hunching and having back pain. I wasn't fine. So the second part is really reclaiming that physical power. And then the last piece is detoxing what you can in your life. What are you using on your body? What candles are you burning in your home? You know, what toxic relationships are you maintaining, and how are your boundaries? So we move through those modules. So at the end of it, at least they can control what they can control. And so that's the course. And then I do individual coaching as well.
There's just so much that we don't know about what causes it. And I can see, especially for people who are listening to our podcast, who are spiritually curious and may have heard thoughts manifest and all of that, I think it could almost become more of a fear because we're aware that our thoughts create a reality. So once you get through that tunnel onto the other side, it's really important to learn how to control the fear, control the thoughts, or at least how to proactively invite the good thoughts into our daily practice.
That's right.
How to put a little barrier up so those other ones don't filter in.
That's it. And there's so much guilt, oddly, that comes when you survive it. It's very strange that I was not expecting that. There's guilt of survivorship. And then there's also the guilt of, I must have done this to myself. Like, how did I do this to myself? And you loop on that, especially when you're in treatment. What did I do to flip the switch? And the truth is, we didn't do anything wrong. No one causes this for themselves. And so you've got to be able to digest those feelings in a way so that when it does pop up, you know, that's an old thought, you know, nothing that's serving me well. And I can replace that with a more empowering thought.
I think that's so important for people to hear too. Everybody that listens know that my son, Graham, he was 9 months old and we did the same kind of thing. It's, oh my gosh, what did I do? Did I expose my something to when I was pregnant? Was it where we were living? There were so many thoughts that went through our minds as well of guilt, just because we were his parents. But again, there's no way ever of knowing. And I know that feeling too about the post. You walk the walk with a lot of other people along the way that don't always make it through. And that is a really hard thing to live with.
So I felt, you know, I've survived it for a reason and I've got to make it, to give it some sort of purpose. So it's just not like this dark spot that happened.
And you can literally show people how to flip that darkness to the light and maybe not live it every day. I think that's the other thing too. It's okay, that's in the past. And now I'm going to move forward and really embrace health and all of the the positive things that I can do to keep my health where it is today.
Yeah, because there are things that we can do. There are things that we know can contribute. And then there's things that I didn't have any of those things that contributed and I still got it. So it's just do the very best you can, eliminate that perfection. Oddly, I was a lot more rigid about a lot of the health practices before cancer than I am after, which seems strange. It seems like in reverse, but you do get the not guaranteed. I'm going to do the very best I can. And I have more fun now in my life than I did even before.
I bet. Yeah. Because you were doing all the in quote things.
Exactly.
So it's like, there's got to be more of a balance. It's a perspective. It gave you a completely different perspective.
It sure did. Yeah.
Well, and I think
it shifted everything.
We learned too that none of these life crisis moments are lost. They're all given to us with an opportunity to learn and grow just in our own selves. But then when you can help other people as a result, then you're really leaning into why you're here and really make, like you said earlier, it's like you can almost look at the experience with gratitude.
For sure. And I say that delicately. I'm tearing up right now because I know a lot of people do not consider their cancer journey the best thing that's ever happened to them. But I honestly did. My path got real clear. I realized all the little stuff that we think about that does not matter at all. And it's given me a purpose that I don't know that I would have found if I didn't get diagnosed. And of course, I feel fortunate because we don't know if it's gone forever, but it's certainly gone right now. And it's easy to sit in my shoes and say, oh, it was great. I'm so glad. But from a relationship with universe and the relationship with my family and my friend and just everything has been richer because I had this near-death experience.
There's two things I want to say. One, it's only been 2 years, which really isn't that long for you to have such a shift, which I want to point out to everybody. And I think what you're saying, it really can apply to everybody, anywhere. You may not have tomorrow because the truth is we never know. We don't know how long we have here. For you, that was a very harsh reminder of it. But now you are able to then shout from the rooftops, look, you can really have a different perspective on life. You can start doing that today.
Yes. And the majority of my clients I work with now are not women who've gone through breast cancer. They were just like me before breast cancer. Perfectionism and people pleasing and workaholism and rigidity. It's like I see them. You don't have to go through this. You can decide now that you're worth it to invest in yourself. Take the time for yourself. It doesn't take a lot of time, but you got to know the tools that you can implement. And now I'm feeling like my mission is gotten bigger, I guess. The path is spread out a little bit more.
I'm glad you brought that up because I would love for you to talk about the fact that you are working with people with cancer and without cancer, and that the deep center is really for everyone. And the recovering perfectionist. I am so grateful that this exists because it really does change things when you go through something and you realize, what was I doing? What was I doing?
For many of us, we don't even realize that is the source of our anxiety, right? It's I'm so anxious, but I don't know why. And then when you just this tiny little layer of surface that you go under, like, I
was like, maybe I should be dancing faster. I'll just dance faster, just do more and get more done. And when I do that, then I can relax. Then I can feel better. And when I've been working with, again, women with breast cancer, the through line is I haven't talked to one yet that wasn't an overachieving perfectionist. And I'm like, maybe that is the source of it. I'm confident stress played a part of it. I had a run-in that wasn't full cancer, but I had basically uterine precancer 5 years before breast cancer. Again, nothing genetic. I thought that was my holy cow, where'd this come from? But now I'm good. Now I'm done. And then breast cancer came and super stressed out. I owned 3 brick and mortar studios. I had 60 employees. I'd grown really quickly. I was a terrible delegator. I had 1 studio where I could do it all. And then I had 2 and still tried. And then I had 3 and that's impossible because you can't be in 3 places. You can't be in 2 either. And so I just think my insides, even though I was meditating and I was moving and I was eating well, my insides were like this acidic stress pool. And so I want to help women before it turns because we know stress is not helpful. Anxiety is not helpful to any illness. It's the root of all of it. So trying to help them before it turns.
And how do you get past the anxiety?
It's every day. And it's having protocols and routines and things that you are committed to coming back to no matter what. Like I meditate no matter what. I tap no matter what. I exercise no matter. And that is hard because it does come at the sacrifice of what can feel like family and friends. And I have grown children, but if I had kids in the house, that's a big pushback I hear from a lot of people. But the truth is we know we're no good to to anybody else unless we're good for ourselves. And since I started meditating, and this was years ago, and my anxiety was starting to dial down, what happens is that after about maybe 6 months of it, you're acting better and you're more enjoyable to be around, so that your family starts actually protecting your meditation time. She's got to go do her thing. Don't interrupt her. She needs her 20 minutes. And so it becomes like a family thing, which is neat. I think it's just hard. We as women, we're self-sacrificing typically, and we get rewarded for doing nothing for ourselves. That seems as like motherhood and being a good wife. And I'm trying to change that paradigm, that way they don't end up like I did, or with something else.
We'd love to give people who are listening tips of what would be your, you've talked a little bit about tapping.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk more about some of those key resources that too.
Yes.
Anxiety is starting to knock on your door.
Okay. So here's my easiest one. The easiest thing to do is to practice some mindfulness, which is just feeling exactly what you're feeling at the time you're feeling it. So it's noticing my hand on my desk, even that 1 second of noticing what you're doing, or noticing yourself breathing, or noticing yourself pausing. When you notice and what you're doing, it does cause your breath to slow down, and it causes your body to shift into a parasympathetic state. So your nervous system starts to de-excite, and stress starts to basically reduce in your body instantly. So anytime, and it doesn't have to be this big, you don't need special fingers and a special seat and a special candle. You just need to notice yourself sipping your drink when you're sipping it, or whatever it is. If you can take time throughout the day to notice that, that'll start to lower anxiety. And you don't need a formal practice for that. However, if you would like a formal practice, I think carving out some time in the morning for routines that you like to start your day off well is really the best thing that I have seen in both myself and my client. Typically, you're able to do it because the house isn't up. You do have to make some time to get up early. But again, it's really about what you like to do. So if you like to read, if you like to journal, if you like to meditate, do that. If you like to tap, I say not exercise. Again, I'm working with a lot of overachieving perfectionists. They're exercising already. That's dialed. It's the quiet time. That's what you need to, again, shift into a state of healing, let the anxiety come down. And a really simple one, if you don't have a formal practice that you can use now, is taking 3 minutes in the morning, first thing in the morning, you don't even have to get out of bed, and ask yourself, who do you want to be today? Not what you want to do, but who do you want to be? I asked myself this morning, who do I want to show up to this podcast? Not what do I want to say, but who do I want to be? And then once I'm clear about that, then I ask myself, what do I want to do today? And make it one thing. If I did this one thing today, would have been a meaningful day, not that whole pile, not that whole list. And so just asking yourself those two powerful questions before you get out of bed is enough to shift your energy and to start to shift your nervous system.
I love that way.
Incorporating those into my morning before I get out of bed. I already
I'm so glad.
But I'm not doing those.
I know mine gets longer and longer.
I know. And you know what? And we are so fortunate because we meet so many thoughtful and in tune people, and we are always learning. And my morning routine gets a little longer, but so worth it, because I feel like I'm showing up so much more in tune with who I really am every day. And I'm able to be in service of others.
And you remind us that we have a choice every day. And it's so easy when you open your eyes to be like, a list. Oh my gosh, I have so much to do. And how am I going to get through it? And the anxiety just, you don't even breathe. And the anxiety is hitting you of all the things. And then, but I love that, but I have the choice of who I want to show up and be. And then I decide I want to be that person of peace in the midst of the madness. I'm just going to be peaceful no matter what happens, or I'm just going to be joyful no matter what happens, or I choose to be seen today as opposed to stepping back and letting the mayhem happen in front of me. It's just so empowering, that very simple thought.
Yeah. And just affirming it. It's not like I have to go back and think about it. Who did I say I wanted to be today? It's in there. Yeah.
And your point in saying one thing that you're going to do, that's easy.
Yes.
You just made it easy.
Yes. And then, you know, what's interesting, when I ask myself, what's the one thing I want to do? What I would have said from a practical standpoint, if I wasn't out of bed and I was alert, I would probably name something else. But what bubbles to the surface is actually what matters. It's the most important thing of that day. And it's not always work related. which I love because that's where a lot of us spend all of our energy, and other stuff gets pushed to the back burner.
Yes, that is so true. I just love, Kendall, how you give all these tips are so helpful. If someone wanted to work with you, either through their cancer journey or just to help them deal with this anxiety and this not enoughness complex that many of us wrestle with, what would they expect? What is your process?
Yes. Okay. I created sort of a signature coaching program that's 12 sessions and 12 steps. It moves from really the grossest elements in your life to the most subtle. So we're moving from left brain to right brain as we travel through those 12 weeks. And the first few sessions are really about clarity, what you want to work on, what you want to shift in your life, and mindset. And then by session 3, I give them they're called anxiety reducing techniques. So now that we know what they want, we've kind of shifted their perspective. Now we can immediately start implementing some techniques. And then we work on sleep, all those fundamentals of stress. Like if your sleep's not right, you're stressed out. There's just no getting around it. So working on sleep hygiene to food, it gets from gross to more subtle. And then by the end, they've got a personal tapping practice. They've got a personal meditation practice, some breath work techniques that they can call on so that it's a really holistic perspective, because anxiety doesn't live in a vacuum. It's got its tentacles and everything. And so we really have to look at the behaviors that are accelerating some of that anxiety.
You spoke about food a couple of times. I noticed on your Instagram feed that you actually give a lot of recipes.
I do.
I know you mentioned you're a nutritionist. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah.
And how that plays a role in the coaching and within the Deep Center?
Yes. Our favorite society anxiety reducing tool causes anxiety. And so I talk a lot about not using alcohol as a crutch, because for a lot of people, that glass of wine is their thing. And I'm about to go to a birthday lunch today with a friend. I'm going to have a glass of wine. So it's not like I'm down on that. It's what sort of crutches are we leaning on that actually make our anxiety worse? Alcohol for sure is one of them. Too much caffeine for sure is another one of them. Eating processed foods, things that you're not nourishing your body. So I try to provide resources. I make a lot of mocktails, and so I have those mocktail recipes on there. I posted yesterday a cookie recipe, but it's made with all really clean, nourishing ingredients so that it's not filled with refined sugar that's causing inflammation. Like all of these things matter. And it's not that eating a real cookie is bad. It's that if you're trying to reduce anxiety, these things might be making it worse. And so how can we shift that by what we're putting in our body? And then choosing things that are really comforting. I recently was in England with my husband, and their ritual of a tea with a biscuit in the middle of the day is so lovely. And even with all the tools I have, that is not something I would typically do, have a cookie in the middle of the day. But I've really been leaning into having my hot tea with a yummy cookie, whether it's a nutritious one I made, or maybe it's just shortbread because it makes me feel nostalgic, but it brings me joy. And so what brings me joy? And so I try to put some recipes on there that brings some joy.
I love that. And I also love the fact that you talk about something that I think is so important, is especially around anxieties, that we always forget that we're this complicated, like we are a machine that is nurtured and fed by the food that we put in there. So if we put in the wrong ingredients, it can elevate our anxiety without all the other emotional aspects there. So there are things nutritionally we can do just by those choices. I think that's just so important for people. And step in to the feel-good moments that you can pepper into your day.
Have much joy.
Yeah, if it's a little teeny tiny ritual like that, that just gives you a moment to be present and to fully lean into something that feels good for you. That just does wonders. And we're just so taught, I don't need to do this. There's too many other things to do. I can't prioritize that in my life. But yet it can be minutes.
Absolutely. You would have spent it scrolling on Instagram anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It goes to that idea of the rigidity being, yes, we want to do as much as we can that's good for us. If you're consistent about putting all those good things in your body or practicing some of these techniques, then those joyful moments that may go out of that zone actually just going to infuse you, break out of that zone sometimes for the joy, because that feeling that it brings you is actually even more important.
It's richer. Yeah, because the second I start saying I can't or I shouldn't, then it's I must. Now I have to.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be someone who's always saying no and is holding themselves so tight.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's also a really good message. It sounds cliche almost now because everybody says it, but to be present. I love what you just said earlier about the anxiety moments. Stop. Where are you? Where are your hands? Just very practical ways of just bringing yourself back down, getting out of your head. Anxiety is always about going into the future. It's trying to drive down the road before you even get there, and all of the churning that your head does ahead of time. So if you can literally just bring yourself back to either looking out the window and at the sky or whatever it is, just to remind you, no, that hasn't happened. You're right here. You're right now. And anything can happen. It can go really well too.
It probably will. Another really practical tool that it's not really so much nutrition, but I always think this is like anytime I can stack these things, it makes it more powerful. So warm water is calming. And so I put warm water with a lemon every morning. And then holding something warm is also very soothing for your nervous system. So warm water with lemon while holding it, while breathing is like 3 stacks of things that reduce your anxiety and can push you back to a more rest and recovery state. So I'm always thinking it's not a time thing. You can stack some of these things. It doesn't have to be its own segment in your life.
Great tips.
And they're really something like, even I'm thinking about my daughter who has suffered from some crippling anxiety. She could, what you just talked about with the warm water, and it's not even an age thing.
No.
It really transcends.
Yeah. And it's just being intentional. I could take a shower or I could take a bath. That's going to really reduce my anxiety. I could slather on the lotion or I could slow down with some body oil and let my nervous system practice that technique called abhyanga, where when you rub yourself with oil, it's an Ayurvedic technique. It deaccelerates your nervous system. We have choices, and sometimes they're like same option, just looked at a little bit differently.
And I think that so many people don't really know these options. They don't know what's possible, what's out there. And you bringing all of these different resources together and serving them up, it allows them to understand they have a choice, but then there's so many different opportunities, different choices.
Yes.
Like a buffet.
And I'm actually launching a new product called Anxiety University. So it's a subscription where I go live and I teach for an hour every single month with some Q&A about going deep on some of these techniques, really breaking down some of my one-on-one work for more of a group coaching setting so that they can have the trainings for life. I have a tapping program. So I teach people how to tap for themselves. I'm putting that into the membership because it's true. I luckily am a seeker, right? And I know obviously you are too. So I find these resources for myself, but a lot of people don't know where to go. And so I'll just put them all together.
That's our goal, is to curate as much of this information for people as possible, especially in situations where a diagnosis comes their way. That at that moment in time, that's where they really need a trusted place to go. And to your point, the medical world is great and it's there to serve a purpose, but we're so multidimensional, and all of these resources that you have, Kendall, are the ones that supplement and really help that anxiety, at least gives you tools to work with that. And anxiety is going to be there. Fear is always going to be there in some shape or form. Just having these alternative ways of dealing with them. And the simpler, the better.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the more simple, usually one, you'll execute it and it's just as powerful.
I've learned so much.
I love being with you both. Thank you.
And I love your authenticity, Kendall. Thank you so much for being so brave, first of all, and just taking action with what you've been given and helping other people with that. I just know that is why you're here. You are here for a reason. It's just so great to be able to meet you and share you with everybody.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you for seeing me, really seeing my heart. I really appreciate it. I feel very seen and very held.
And for everyone listening, not only are you a beautiful person on the outside, you can feel your beauty that is coming from within, and your energy. It's like this blanket of light. That is what it feels like, I have to say. And I bet everyone right now can feel that. And to Karen's point, there's that authenticity, and it's just light. Who doesn't want to be around that?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Gosh, that's energy is one of the words I chose that I wanted to be today. Energetic.
I see that. I feel it.
Thank you.
You can find out more about Kendall and the Deep Center on thedeepcenter.co. You can also follow Kendall on Instagram and Facebook at The Deep Center. Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you.
Kendall.